History loves to remember Napoleon Bonaparte as a genius of war, a man who reshaped Europe with nothing but ambition, charisma, and strategy. But behind the medals, the speeches, and the victories, there was something darker, a mind that understood how to use people like weapons. Napoleon didn't just win battles, he engineered belief. He understood something few leaders ever do, that humans aren't ruled by truth, they're ruled by perception. Armies don't fight for facts, they fight for symbols. And Napoleon was the symbol. He made himself the living embodiment of destiny, the man chosen not by birth but by brilliance. When people saw him, they didn't see a general, they saw France itself. Every victory became propaganda, every speech became psychology, every image became manipulation. He was a strategist, not only on the battlefield, but inside the minds of millions. So here's the question that will guide us through this story. How did Napoleon use Machiavellian strategy to dominate Europe? And what psychological weapons made him almost invincible? Because in the end, Napoleon's empire wasn't built on cannon fire. It was built on belief. Before we begin, subscribe and tell me in the comments, do you think power is born from strategy or from charisma? Most people believe power is built on talent, intelligence, or destiny. They imagine that great leaders rise because they are naturally gifted, that their success is the result of brilliance alone. But history, and especially psychology, tells a much colder truth. Power doesn't belong to the smartest, the strongest, or even the bravest. It belongs to those who can control perception. Napoleon understood this better than anyone. He knew that men don't follow leaders because of truth. They follow because of illusion. They follow confidence that looks unbreakable. They follow certainty that feels divine. They follow those who make them believe their obedience serves something greater than themselves. Most people fail because they chase competence without charisma. They focus on being right, when in the game of power, being believed matters more than being right. That's why so many talented people are forgotten, while manipulative ones rise. Napoleon was not the tallest, the most handsome, or even the most royal man in the room, but he was the one who made others see him as destined. And once perception takes root, it becomes reality. The problem is that most of us underestimate the force of illusion. We tell ourselves that truth is enough, that honesty wins hearts. But Napoleon and Machiavelli before him proved that the world doesn't follow truth. The world follows stories, symbols, and confidence. And whoever controls the story controls the people. Napoleon Bonaparte wasn't born into greatness. He was born in Corsica, an island far from the elegance and privilege of Paris. The French nobility looked down on him, dismissing him as a provincial outsider with an accent too harsh and manners too blunt. But Napoleon understood early what others didn't. If you're not born powerful, you can build the illusion of power until the world believes it's real. He began not with armies, but with symbols. During his first campaigns in Italy, Napoleon didn't just win battles, he told stories about them. He sent exaggerated reports back to France describing his victories in almost divine terms. Newspapers called him the savior of the Republic. Artists painted him as a heroic figure bathed in light, standing above fallen enemies. These weren't coincidences. They were carefully orchestrated pieces of psychological warfare. Napoleon made sure the public saw him not as a soldier, but as a myth in progress. Every image, every word, every victory became part of a larger narrative. The story of a man chosen by destiny. It was propaganda, but it worked. When he finally returned to Paris, he wasn't just a general, he was a legend. Crowds cheered not for who he was, but for who they believed he was. That's how power begins, not with control but with belief. Years later, when he crowned himself emperor in front of the Pope, he completed the illusion. That single gesture, placing the crown on his own head, was pure Machiavelli. It told the world that he didn't need divine permission to rule. He was divine authority. Napoleon once said, "Men are moved by two levers only, fear and self-interest." But he understood a third, belief. He used it to turn ordinary men into fanatics, willing to die for him. He built not just an empire of land, but an empire of minds. And that's why his story isn't just history, it's psychology. The Empire of France may have fallen, but the empire of influence he built still lives in every leader who knows that to be believed is to be obeyed. Napoleon Bonaparte didn't just win wars, he rewired the way people thought about him. His power wasn't built only on tactics or intelligence, it was built on psychological precision. Everything he did, Every gesture, speech, and silence was calculated to create belief. And belief, once created, becomes more powerful than any army. Napoleon's success can be explained through three psychological weapons: perception, control, and timing. Perception was his first and greatest weapon. Napoleon understood that people don't follow reality, they follow symbols. He made himself the living symbol of victory. Every portrait painted him taller than he was, every report exaggerated his heroism, every statue presented him as a god among men. He once said, "Imagination rules the world," and he meant it literally. He didn't just command troops, he commanded imagination. He turned himself into the embodiment of France's destiny, so that to oppose him felt like opposing France itself. That's not just charisma, that's psychological warfare. Control was his second weapon. Napoleon didn't just fight his enemies, he controlled the information about them. He mastered propaganda, censored criticism, and surrounded himself with people whose survival depended on his approval. He created what psychologists now call a control loop, a system where every voice around him reflected only what he wanted to hear. This built an illusion of perfection, one that reinforced his confidence but also blinded him to his weaknesses. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Napoleon agreed, but he improved on it. He made people love the fear they felt for him. Timing was his final weapon. Napoleon understood that hesitation kills authority. He acted before others had time to think. His genius wasn't just in strategy, it was in speed. He knew that when people hesitate, they reveal uncertainty, and uncertainty is contagious. By moving quickly, even when wrong, Napoleon projected confidence, and confidence is magnetic. People follow the one who looks most certain, not the one who is most correct. These three weapons, perception, control, and timing, formed the foundation of his empire. They made him unstoppable for a time because they attacked something deeper than armies, the human mind. Napoleon didn't just command men to fight, he made them believe that fighting for him was fighting for destiny itself. But here's the hidden danger. When a leader becomes the myth he created, he begins to serve the illusion instead of shaping it. And that's the point where every Machiavellian begins to fall. From Napoleon's empire, we can extract three Machiavellian laws of power that are as relevant today as they were on the battlefields of Europe. These laws are not just about war, they are about influence, presence, and the ability to shape the perception of others before they even question you. Law 1. Craft the myth before you earn it. Napoleon didn't wait to become a hero before acting like one. He created the image first and then made the world conform to it. When he was still a low-ranking officer, he spoke and moved as if he already commanded legions. People began to treat him as more important than he was, and soon enough, he became that person. Psychologically, this works because the human brain responds more strongly to confidence than to credentials. People assume authority in those who act with certainty. Napoleon built an aura that preceded his reality, and the world adapted. Application. In life, stop waiting to be ready. Appear ready. Act like the version of yourself that others should respect. Speak like someone who expects to be listened to. Once people see the image, they subconsciously search for reasons to justify it. Perception creates proof. Law 2. Control. Perception, not people. Napoleon didn't need to micromanage his empire. He just needed to manage what people believed about it. When he lost battles, he called them strategic withdrawals. When he won, he made sure the world heard the story 10 times over. Even his defeats served his myth. He understood that reality doesn't matter. The narrative about reality does. This is a core Machiavellian principle. Control what people see, and you won't need to control what they do. Application. You can't control how everyone acts, but you can control how they perceive you. Define what you stand for. Repeat it consistently, and never contradict your own image in public. The person who controls the story controls the outcome. Law 3. Act decisively, even in uncertainty. Napoleon once said, "Take time to deliberate, but when the time for action comes, stop thinking and go in." He knew that indecision is death to authority. Leaders who hesitate invite doubt. Leaders who move swiftly create belief. Even when wrong, Napoleon's boldness made others trust his leadership. People follow those who seem certain, because certainty feels safe, even when it isn't. Application. In your own life, act before you feel completely ready. Boldness is magnetic. Once you take decisive action, others align with your energy. Confidence spreads faster than logic. These three laws, myth, perception, and decisiveness, are Napoleon's legacy. They can make you magnetic, influential, even unstoppable, but they also come with a warning. The same illusion that can make you rise can also blind you, because once you start believing your own myth, you lose sight of reality. And that's when every empire, personal or political, starts to crumble. Imagine walking into a room and feeling the shift in energy, not because you speak loudly, not because you demand attention, but because your presence already carries authority. That's the transformation Napoleon mastered, and that's what you begin to understand once you see power for what it really is. Psychology made visible. When you learn to shape perception, you stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself to people who already decided not to listen. You project confidence instead of requesting approval. That's the first shift, from seeking attention to commanding it. When you master decisiveness, you stop living in hesitation. You stop waiting for permission or for the perfect moment. The truth is, no leader ever feels completely ready. Napoleon didn't win because he knew everything. He won because he moved while others were still thinking. That's the second shift, from doubt to momentum. And when you understand control, not of people but of image, you begin to realize that influence is about what others believe you are capable of. Napoleon shaped that belief relentlessly. He didn't try to be perfect, he tried to be unforgettable. That's the third shift, from perfection to presence. These transformations are not about domination, they're about awareness. Because when you see how perception, confidence, and control work in others, you stop being manipulated by them. You start recognizing the Napoleons of your own life, the people who use image and illusion to lead you. And once you see the mechanism, it loses its power over you. That's the real victory, understanding the game well enough to play it consciously. To know that you don't need to rule empires to use strategy. Sometimes all you need to rule is yourself. Napoleon Bonaparte changed the map of Europe, but his real conquest was the human mind. He understood something timeless. People don't follow truth, they follow perception. They don't worship power, they worship confidence. And that's why his story isn't just about war, it's about psychology. He lived by three laws. Craft the myth before you earn it. Control perception, not people. Act decisively even in uncertainty. With these principles, he built an empire that seemed unstoppable. But like every Machiavellian genius, Napoleon eventually became a prisoner of his own illusion. The image he created consumed the man he was. And when his myth began to crack, his empire collapsed with it. That's the paradox of power. The same psychology that builds an empire can also destroy it. Because the moment you start believing your own legend, you stop adapting, and the world catches up. So maybe the real lesson isn't just how to rule, but how to stay conscious while doing it, how to use perception without losing authenticity, how to project strength without becoming a slave to it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Napoleon was a visionary strategist or just a brilliant manipulator? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading everyone. And if this video helped you see power differently, subscribe now, because in the next episode, we'll go even deeper into the mind of the man who inspired rulers like Napoleon himself, Niccolo Machiavelli, the father of political psychology. Until then, remember, power is perception. Control it, or be controlled by it. Stay strategic, stay aware, stay powerful.